So I was watching this horror movie the other night, and this guy gets his head slowly crushed, and I'm thinking, how long would you actually be conscious for that? Turns out the answer is way more messed up than you think. And by the end of this video, you're gonna know exactly which horror movie deaths would be the most painful way to go. So we're starting with what might surprise you, the least painful death in this video. Yeah, I know, we're talking about the pale man from Pan's Labyrinth, the creepy monster with eyeballs in his hands eating fairy heads. But hear me out. Here's the thing, if we're talking pure pain science, this is actually the most merciful way to go in this video, which is weird to say about a child-eating demon, but here we are. So let me paint you the scene real quick. Little Ophelia goes into this room where there's Pete Davidson sitting, pale skinny guy, just sitting there with his hands on the table, except his eyes aren't in his head. They're sitting in his palms, because apparently regular eye placement was way too mainstream for this guy. She's supposed to grab a dagger and get out without eating anything. Simple job, right? Well, little old stupid Ophelia sees some grapes and thinks, you know what? I've been having a rough day. I deserve a little snacky snack. Bad choice, dumb child. The moment she eats those grapes, this thing wakes up, pops his eyeballs into his hands, and starts chasing her around. Two of her fairy guides don't make it out, and he just snatches them right out of the air, bites their heads off, and starts chewing on them. Now you're probably thinking, how is getting your head bitten off by a monster the least painful thing in this video? Well, let me break it down what actually happens to your brain when something like this occurs. Problem is, your brain won't be around to receive it. The whole journey a pain signal would take to reach your brain takes about a fraction of a second, but when something crushes your skull and brainstem with the force of a monster jaw, your consciousness just stops. Like someone unplugged a computer. There's no goodbye message, no dramatic last thoughts, just the instant off switch. The crazy thing is, this creature was designed to be as scary as possible. The director, Guillermo del Toro, based him on this old painting called Satan Devouring His Son. Real cheery, where this guy is just chomping on a person. They had this actor, Doug Jones, wearing this massive practical effects suit, and the poor guy could only see out of the thing's nostrils. When he went cross-eyed, imagine trying to act menacing while basically being blind and breathing through nose holes. Here's what makes this death so painless, and I'm using air quotes because getting eaten by a demon isn't exactly a spa day. Your nervous system just can't keep up with what is happening. When your entire head gets crushed in one bite, there's no time for that conversation to happen between your nerves and your brain. The real horror of this scene isn't about the fairies feeling pain. It's about Ophelia watching it happen. It's about you sitting in your chair, seeing this thing that represents every childhood fear about monsters under the bed. The fairies, they're gone before they even knew what hit them, which honestly is probably the best you can hope for when dealing with an eyeball hand demon. So yeah, getting your head instantly crushed by a supernatural creature might look absolutely terrible, but from a pure pain science standpoint, it's over before your brain even knows the party started. The pale man isn't torturing his victims. He's just really good at doing his job, and his job is murdering children. But not all movie deaths are that quick to the punch, because now we're talking about death by farm equipment, which honestly wasn't on my bingo card for horror movie discussions, but apparently that's where we are now. We're talking about the nightclub massacre from The Collection. Now, if you don't know anything about me, my dad is actually a farmer, and I grew up on a farm my entire childhood. And the very first thing you were taught on the farm is do not go near the equipment. And to really reinforce this, they would have people come in at school with hooks for hands because they lost them in a grain auger. This is real stuff. Farm equipment is deadly. Getting that out of the way though, The Collection starts with what I can only describe as the world's worst DJ set. You've got this packed underground nightclub, everyone's dancing, having a good time, probably paying way too much for watered down drinks. Then this girl, Elena, finds a red trunk, opens it up, and boom. She's just triggered the most elaborate and expensive way to clear a dance floor ever invented. Picture this, massive rotating blades drop from the ceiling. Then, and this is where the movie really commits the bit, a full-size combine harvester descends into the club and just starts harvesting. Except instead of wheat, it's people. The collector, who apparently has a serious hobby budget, has turned this entire venue into his personal murder factory. Now, combine harvesters are designed to cut through stalks of grain and separate the good stuff from the waste. They're industrial machines with rotating blades that can chop through pretty much anything. When you apply that to human bodies, well, the physics are pretty straightforward and pretty awful. Here's the issue with getting hit by a combine harvester. There is no time. We're talking about a machine that weighs several tons, with rotating blades designed to cut through thick plant stalks. When that hits a human body, what do you think is going to happen? The people right in the path of this thing, their brains are getting destroyed so fast the pain signal would never make it to their destination. The rotating blades would cause what the research calls catastrophic structural trauma, which is medical speak for everything important just got turned into soup. What makes this scene so effective isn't the individual suffering, because there really isn't any for most of these people. It's the sheer scale and the helplessness. You're watching dozens of people get caught in this trap, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The collector isn't torturing individuals here. He's just literally showing off his murder talent. The director, Marcus Dunstan, wanted to top the first movie's elaborate traps, so he went full industrial. Apparently, when you're making a sequel about a guy who builds death machines, you don't go smaller. You go, let's rent actual farm equipment and see what happens. The practical effects team had to figure out how to make this look real without actually turning the cast into human confetti, which I imagine was an interesting conversation with the insurance company. But from a pain perspective, this is still relatively merciful. It's gonna hurt, but the victims don't have a ton of time to process what's happening to them. So it's a couple seconds of extreme pain and then lights out. Most of you watching probably don't understand the scale of how big a combine is. The blades are huge. They have a rotor inside the middle of them that is literally the size of like 5 human beings stacked together into like a cylinder. Do not go near combines. They will eat you. But things will get worse when victims actually stay conscious during the damage, because Event Horizon gives us something really special. A character who does something absolutely horrifying to himself and doesn't feel a thing. Dr. Weir, played by Sam Neill, yes, the dinosaur man, has been possessed by this evil spaceship that's basically a portal to hell. And when I say possessed, I mean completely taken over. His consciousness is gone and replaced by whatever cosmic horror lives in that ship. So when he shows up with his eyes gouged out, holding them in his hands, he's not experiencing any pain at all. Now, under normal circumstances, gouging your own eyes out would be one of the most agonizing things you could ever possibly do to yourself. Your optic nerve contains over 1 million individual nerve fibers. That's a massive bundle of pain receptors all clustered together in one spot. Ripping that out of your skull would send an overwhelming flood of pain signals to your brain. Have you ever been poked in the eye? You ever gotten a little dust particle in your eye? All that stuff hurts. Now imagine taking a whole spoon and just going like it's ice cream. Ouch. But Ware isn't getting those signals because the thing controlling his body has essentially overridden his nervous system. He's not human anymore. He's just a meat puppet being operated by something that doesn't care about pain. When he says, "Where we're going, you won't need eyes to see," he's completely calm about it. That's not the voice of someone who just performed surgery on himself with bared hands. That's the voice of a psycho. The real terror here isn't physical. It's the complete erasure of a person. Weir was a brilliant scientist who designed this ship, and now he's being reduced to a mouthpiece for evil. His body is still walking around, but everything that made him human is just gone. What makes this scene work so well is that Sam Neill plays it completely straight. He's not writhing in agony or screaming. He's matter of fact about having mutilated himself. Like that's messed up. If you imagine you were watching me talk like that to this entire video, I would think there's something wrong with you. Like I would want you to click off this video. The possession has turned off his ability to feel anything, including the natural human instinct to avoid hurting yourself. The movie's production was apparently cursed from day one. Director Paul W.S. Anderson shot way more graphic footage than what made it into theaters. There were scenes of people being tortured and dismembered that were so intense, the studio made him cut them out. Most of that footage is now lost, which honestly might be the best based on what people who saw it have said. But I think audiences back then were a bunch of wimps. If this released today with all of that lost footage, it might be like one of the best movies of all time. It is already a really good movie. I think cosmic horror is one of the most terrifying concepts out there. I know, such a bold take, but I get creeped out by it. From a pain science perspective, this death represents something unique, complete disconnection from physical sensation. So while the act itself would normally be excruciating, Weir experiences nothing. He's already dead in every way that matters. His body is just following new instructions from a very unpleasant evil demon. But unfortunately, not everyone gets supernatural anesthesia during their final moments. Because now we get to watch Vince Vaughn, turn someone's head into a piece of sidewalk art, which was definitely not what I expected from the guy who made Wedding Crashers. I know what you're thinking. I thought the exact same thing too. Vince Vaughn, funny, tall, good looking. Horror movie, drama, what? Vince Vaughn is like 6'5" if you didn't know. There's something terrifying about a man that big. My older brother is 6'5". I'm 6'2". I don't mess with my older brother just because he is that tall. But Vince Vaughn plays this brutal prison character so damn well. If you have not seen this movie, you need to watch it. I am surprised it was good. I didn't think it would be good. It is really good. Anyways, Vince Vaughn plays a former boxer who needs to get himself transferred to a supermax prison. So naturally, he starts a fight in the yard and proceeds to systematically break everyone's limbs. You know, normal Tuesday stuff. But the last guy, Vaughn's character Bradley, decides to make an example out of him. First, he stomps on this poor guy's head with enough force to crack concrete. We're talking about a skull getting compressed under the full weight and momentum of a very large, very angry man. When you are that tall, you weigh a lot. And here's what happens when you apply that much force to a human head. Everything important just stops working immediately. Your skull isn't just there for decoration, it's protecting your brain, which is basically the consistency of tofu if you didn't know. When that protective shell gets crushed, the brain tissue inside gets damaged so severely that consciousness just vanishes. Bradley is making the point to everyone else watching that you don't want to fuck with this Wedding Crasher. The director S. Craig Zahler has this thing where he'll spend an hour building characters and having slow, thoughtful conversations, and then suddenly someone's face is getting removed with concrete. It's whiplash, but intentional whiplash. He wants you to forget you're watching a violent movie, and then bam, curb stomping ×5. If this horror channel ever works out and I end up like working on a horror movie or something like that, I want to be the guy that gets curb stomped. I don't want to be the star. I want to be the dead guy because it's funny. Anyways, the practical effects team had to figure out how to make it look like a human face was being scraped off without actually scraping off an actor's face, which I imagine required some very specific expertise. They used prosthetics and what I can only assume was an ungodly amount of fake blood. What makes this death particularly brutal isn't the pain, because again, there isn't any after the initial stomp. It's the complete destruction of human dignity. For this person goes from a living human being to just meat being dragged around for intimidation purposes. And Vince Vaughn does all of this with the same casual energy he's used to bring to romantic comedies. There's something deeply unsettling about watching someone who used to play lovable goofballs just destroying another human being's skull and then using their head as a mop. This scene drags on in the best ways possible, but some other deaths drag on much longer. Because Men Behind the Sun is one of those movies that makes you question why anyone thought filming this was a good idea. This film is about Unit 731, which was Japan's secret biological warfare program during World War II. Real historical stuff, real atrocities, but the movie decides to recreate everything with special effects that are way too convincing for anyone's comfort. There's this scene where they take a Chinese prisoner and stick him in a decompression chamber. They're testing what happens to the human body when air pressure drops really fast. Spoiler alert, nothing good. Now, I used to go to a science camp as a kid, and we used to make decompression chambers. No, we did not put ourselves into them. We put marshmallows into them. You know what happens when you put a marshmallow in there? It gets really big and puffy. Fun fact, in this movie, as they lower the pressure, this guy starts swelling up. Then his intestines get violently shot out of his body through his asshole. The whole thing is supposed to show what happens during explosive decompression, except the movie takes it way over the top for shock value. Now, explosive decompression is a real thing that can happen to pilots, divers, or anyone who experiences a sudden change in air pressure. Your body is used to the normal pressure we have down here on Earth. When that pressure drops really fast, all the gases inside your body, in your lungs, your stomach, your butt start expanding rapidly. The science behind this is pretty straightforward. Gases expand when pressure decreases. That's basic physics. So if you're suddenly exposed to very low pressure, the air inside your body tries to get out fast. This causes what doctors call barotrauma, which is basically your body getting damaged by pressure changes, or as I like to call it, a fart so big you shit yourself out of yourself. I am never getting a medical degree for that reason alone. My parents would be so proud. Then your lungs would be in serious trouble as the air inside them expands. The nitrogen dissolved in your blood would come out of solution and form bubbles, which is extremely painful and can kill you. At very low pressures, your blood and other bodily fluids can actually start to boil. But here's the thing about consciousness during this process. You wouldn't last too long enough to feel most of it, but you'd feel quite a bit. But the amount you would feel would hurt so bad. The rapid drop in oxygen pressure means your brain stops getting what it needs to function. You'd pass out within seconds seconds, long before the really dramatic stuff the movie shows. The intestinal explosion thing, that's mostly movie magic. While your digestive tract would definitely be affected by the pressure change, it wouldn't launch your organs across the room. The filmmakers cranked up the gore factor because subtly it wasn't really their goal here. And my joke earlier about the big fart is not real either, because that only happens in this movie. But we should spread more misinformation on the internet because it's fun. So you should like this video and subscribe for misinformation. The director TF Mo claimed he was trying to educate people about forgotten war crimes, which is admirable in theory. But then he went and made it look like a Japanese torture experiment highlight reel, complete with practical effects that probably traumatized the entire crew. Obviously, the movie got banned in multiple countries, not just for graphic content, but because some people weren't sure if they were watching special effects or actual archival footage. I talked about this in one of my videos on banned horror movies. It was one of the most disturbing sections in that video. If you want to hear more about it, go watch it. But that's either a testament to the effects team's skill or evidence that they went too far. From a pain perspective, this death would involve intense suffering for maybe 10 to 15 seconds before consciousness disappears. The victim would feel their body swelling, experiencing crushing pain in their ears and chest, and then mercifully pass out before the worst of it happens. But of course, some victims are going to be staying awake for much stranger experiences, because A Nightmare on Elm Street pulls off something really messed up. It makes you feel phantom pain for someone who's getting killed by a dream. So Tina Gray is having a sleepover with her friends after some really weird nightmares. She falls asleep, and in her dream, she gets chased around by this burned guy with knife fingers. Pretty standard nightmare stuff, right? Well, except while she's dreaming, her boyfriend Rod is lying right next to her, watching her body get slashed up by invisible claws. Now that sounds like a bad dream, but my worst nightmare? I was on a date with a velociraptor. I am not talking about the rest of it. Let me know your worst dream ever in the comments below. If it was more disturbing than that, I have a therapist I can refer you to. It's not BetterHelp though. They won't sponsor me. So yeah, 4 deep cuts just appear across her chest out of nowhere. Then she gets dragged up the wall and across the ceiling while blood is pouring everywhere. Rod is just lying there watching his girlfriend get murdered by nothing he can see, which honestly might be the most helpless situation anyone could be in. What makes his death so uniquely awful is the whole dream reality thing. Tina's brain is processing real physical trauma, but her consciousness is stuck in the dream world fighting Freddy Krueger. So she's experiencing genuine life-threatening injuries while thinking she's just having a really bad nightmare. Research shows that pain in dreams is actually pretty rare. Most people don't feel physical pain when they're asleep, even in nightmares. But Freddy's whole supernatural deal is making dream injuries manifest in the real world. So Tina's nervous system is getting all the pain signals from her body being slashed open, but her brain can't figure out what's actually happening to her. This creates what scientists call cognitive dissonance, which is when your brain is getting conflicting information you can't make sense of. Her body is screaming, "You're being killed," while her mind is going, "It's just a dream, bozo." Except it's both. She literally is dying from dream injuries. The practical effects for this scene were insane. They built this rotating room so they could film Amanda Weiss crawling on what looked like the ceiling. She had to do all of her acting while basically being spun around in a giant hamster wheel. The blood was pumped through hidden tubes, and they had to time everything perfectly to make it look like she was being dragged by invisible forces. Wes Craven got the idea for this movie from newspaper articles about refugees who were dying in their sleep after having terrible nightmares. These were real people who literally died from bad dreams, which is both tragic and completely terrifying. Leave it to Craven to read that and think, you know what, I can make this worse. Amanda Weiss later said the whole experience was genuinely disorienting and scary, even knowing it was just special effects. Being spun around in a rotating room while covered in fake blood and pretending to be attacked by an invisible monster will apparently mess with your head. The death also completely subverts your expectations. Tina seems like she's going to be the main character. She's the first person we really follow. She's dealing with the nightmares. She seems important. Then boom, she's dead 20 minutes into the movie. Craven basically said, your assumptions about horror movie protagonists mean nothing here. This is not your final girl. From a pain science standpoint, Tina would experience all of the agony of having her chest sliced open, but her brain would be trying to process it through the filter of dream logic. It's psychological torture combined with actual physical trauma. And speaking of torture, let's talk about targeting very specific body parts. I Spit on Your Grave is the movie that made Ebert so angry he basically had a public breakdown in his review, calling it a vile bag of garbage. Which, fair enough, we're just here for the science. Jennifer Hills gets her revenge on the gang leader Johnny by pretending to seduce him. She lures him into a bathtub, and just when he thinks that something's gonna happen, she pulls out a knife and castrates him. Then she locks him in the bathroom and puts on classical music to cover up his screaming while he bleeds to death. This is where we need to talk about why this particular form of injury is so uniquely agonizing. The male reproductive anatomy is basically designed to be as sensitive as possible. Every part of it is packed with nerve endings because, from an evolutionary standpoint, protecting that area is pretty important for the survival of the species. The testicles contain more pain receptors per square inch than almost anywhere else in the human body. Doctors rank testicular pain as a 10 out of 10 on pain scales. Women giving childbirth can only imagine how painful getting kicked in the balls actually is. Like, childbirth is nothing compared to that. That is a joke. I feel like I need to preface that before I piss off my 30% women audience. I would never want to give birth. You tell me I gotta shit a baby, that looks painful. I'll get kicked in the balls any day. Basically, just getting hit there can make grown men vomit from the intensity. Now imagine completely severing all of that with a sharp blade. When Jennifer cuts through the cord, she's slicing through arteries, veins, and a massive concentration of nerves all bundled together. The pain would be immediate, overwhelming, and nauseating. Johnny would experience what's called neurogenic shock, where extreme pain overloads the nervous system and causes blood pressure to plummet. But here's the really awful part. He doesn't pass out right away. Neurogenic shock can cause you to lose consciousness, but it's not guaranteed. He would remain awake for several minutes while bleeding out from severed arteries. The classical music Jennifer puts on isn't just to mask the noise, it's psychological torture, turning his agony into a soundtrack. The director said he made this film after helping a real victim of this type of crime who was treated dismissively by police. His goal was to force audiences to sit with uncomfortable violence instead of looking away. Mission accomplished, I guess, because this movie got banned in more countries than most people could name. The bathtub setting makes this everything worse because Johnny can't escape or put pressure on the wound. He's just trapped there with his injury while Jennifer calmly leaves him to die, as she should. The water would be turning red pretty quickly and he'd be watching his life literally drain away. Now, that was bad, but now we gotta talk about Antichrist. Antichrist is a Lars von Trier film, which means you know going in that someone's gonna have a very bad time in a very artistic way. The movie follows a couple who go to a cabin in the woods to deal with their grief after their child dies. The husband tries to help his wife through therapy, but she completely loses it and starts doing things that make you wonder if maybe they should have just stayed home and gotten a normal therapist. In the most shocking scene, she goes into the bathroom, takes a pair of rusty scissors, and performs, I'm not even reading that word, but basically she cuts off a very sensitive part of herself in the no-no zone. And you just watch in graphic detail. It's the kind of scene that made people walk out of theaters and probably question their life choices. Now, from a pain science standpoint, this is about as bad as it gets. The part of the body that I'm pretty sure doesn't exist has over 8,000 nerve endings packed into a very small area. That's double what men have in their entire reproductive system. Evolution basically designed this part of the body to be as sensitive as possible, and then she decided to attack it with scissors. The pain would be immediate and overwhelming. It would cause what doctors call breakthrough pain. Agony so intense it can cause shock and loss of consciousness. Here's what makes this scene so disturbing. She doesn't react the way a normal person would. She's not screaming or passing out. Her psychological break is so complete that she's essentially trying to replace emotional pain with physical pain. Apparently, the director made this movie while going through his own severe depression, and he said the whole film was basically him working through his mental health issues on camera. Practical effects team had to create prosthetics and use body doubles for the explicit shots because, shockingly, no actresses were willing to actually mutilate themselves for art. Duh! They worked with medical professionals to make sure the anatomy looked accurate, which is probably not a sentence anyone expected to write on their resume. But our final death shows what happens when someone becomes completely paralyzed. Wolf Creek takes the crown for the most psychologically devastating death you could possibly imagine, and it comes courtesy of Australia's least friendly tour guide. Liz Hunter is backpacking through the Australian outback when she meets Mick Tyler, who seems like a helpful local until he reveals he's actually a serial killer with a hobby of torturing tourists. After a bunch of failed escape attempts, Mick finally gets tired of playing cat and mouse. First, he starts cutting off her fingers just for shits and gigs. But that's not the worst part, not even close. Mick places the tip of his knife right at the base of her spinal cord. There's this sickening crunch, and suddenly Liz goes completely limp from the neck down. Now here's where this gets absolutely nightmarish. When your spinal cord gets cut, everything below that point just stops working. No movement, no feeling, nothing. But your brain? your brain is still completely functional. You can still think, see, hear, and speak. You're just trapped inside a body that won't respond to anything you tell it to do. This condition is called tetraplegia, and it's exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Liz is now fully conscious and aware of everything happening to her, but she can't move her arms, legs, or torso. She can't even feel them. It's her worst nightmare made real, being completely helpless while her killer stands over her. And that's when Mick delivers the line that gives this death its name. Now, you're just a head on a stick. He's not wrong. That's literally what she becomes, a conscious mind attached to a body that might as well just be a stick. The really sick part is that Mick didn't do this to kill her quickly. He did it to make her completely dependent on him. She can't fight back, she can't run away, she can't even move. She's at his mercy for however long he decides to keep her alive. Director Greg McLean based this character on real Australian serial killers Ivan Milat and Bradley Murdoch. And that head on a stick line supposedly came from actual police case files. So somewhere out there, a real person said those words to a real victim, which makes this whole thing even more disturbing. From a pain science perspective, this represents the absolute worst case scenario. Liz experiences all the agony of having her fingers cut off and her spinal cord severed, but then she's forced to remain conscious for whatever psychological torture comes next. She can't even pass out from the trauma because her brain is still getting blood flow. This isn't just murder, it's the complete destruction of someone's self while leaving their mind intact to process every second of how helpless they are. So there you have it. These are a bunch of the most brutal deaths from horror movies. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like this video. It lets me know that you want more videos just like this, and comment down below what deaths you want me to cover next. And subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. If you want to watch more of my content, click the video on screen because it's even better than this one.